Again, Peter, let me thank you for agreeing to participate in this project, to share your story. I think it's a fascinating story. And so I'm just going to invite you to share with your audience what your early years were like leading up to high
Huh.
school, through college, to your first job in the professorate, and like all the stuff that we have done, an idea of the early years. So we know who Peter Mark is based on his background and history.
I really think I've led a charmed life, and it's been in music. And I owe that to my mother, who was a natural musician and a school teacher. She taught high school music, which was not the best match for her talents, but she was remarkable, very intelligent, as my dad was. He was an American historian, colonial period. They were both the first people in the family born in America, so we're sort of newcomers. And they had all of that to deal with. Their parents came fleeing from the pogroms, because we were a Jewish family, in Central Europe, and came to the United States early in the 20th century. They educated themselves and had a wonderful life. And I remember that the piano that my mother played was in the living room, and I would lie underneath it while she was practicing and luxuriate in the sound, because the sounding board added all that richness that you don't all get to hear always when you're on the other side of the piano, but lying underneath it, you really do hear it. So
Mm.
music became a very sensual experience for me. And evidently, when she had to go off to the kitchen from the living room to start the meal, the story was at the age of 5, I went onto the piano and picked out the melodies of what she had been playing. So she decided that she should teach me music. Because there was always classical music in our house, whether it was her playing or recordings. They were 33 and a third records, I think, just came in then. So she taught me for about 2 years. Then she decided that I should really go to a real teacher who was a pedagogue. And I do remember that I had a series of lessons with someone who was well known. And the along the way, she hauled off and slapped me across the face and humiliated me in the class in front of everyone. I came home crying, locked myself in the bathroom, and said I wasn't going to play the piano anymore. And I just wouldn't open the door. I wouldn't listen to anything my mother said, etc. And finally, she said to me, "Okay, so if you're not going to play the piano, what will you play?" I said, "Well, what is there?" And she said, "Well, there's the violin." I said, "I'm going to play the violin." So at age 7, I switched to violin. And I just remember that my mother arranged for me to also see other kids that had musical training in her network of friends. My parents had a great network of friends. They were all progressives. One was the head of the teachers union at the time, Abe Letterman, and they were trying to modernize the education system with what was known in psychology and what their liberal view of our multiracial democracy was. So for me as a child, I was absorbing that. Every sort of weekend, there was a gathering of people at my parents' house. Of course, it wasn't all political, but there was a lot going on when I was a kid. I mean, it was the Second World War and the aftermath of the Second World War. I actually think I grew up in the best time ever in the States, because the 50s, the middle class grew tremendously, and there was a lot of policies that went into place that really supported workers and voters, and it was a great time. So for me, music was an extension of exactly that kind of environment, because you perfect and play music in order to express something for other people.
Mm.
And so it's basically a sharing spiritual process that has a lot to do with beauty, idealism, truth, seeking truth, making the world better, making it more harmonious. All of those aspects were fed into me in all ways in my early life. In grade school, I just remember being a very happy, free, rather rambunctious kid that just had a discipline after school to come and practice my violin. And New York is very hot in the summers. This year it's like 105.
Wow.
So my parents became uh, teachers at a summer camp. My father was the swimming instructor, and my mother was the put on like musicals. And I wound up auditioning and getting good roles and developing my voice singing in the summers. And then along about 1950, 51, I was 10. She bought me a recording of Renata Tebaldi's Aida, singing Aida, Verdi's Aida, which is the first contact I believe I had with opera. That the human voice, with no instrument, no wood or metal, could be that expressive and warm musically, and actually all that music is focused on a dramatic story, a human story. That brought my understanding of music to a different and higher level. I thought that was magnificent, and I wore out all the grooves in that long playing record, following the Italian translation in English in libretto. And sort of that was the first opera that I got to know and
Right.
have the support of like 100 players in the orchestra putting all their energy and their sound into it. It's opened a world to me that would be the focus of my life later on that I just didn't realize. The composer Giancarlo Menotti was auditioning for young substitutes and people who could sing, young kids who could sing them all. My mother trotted me up there at the age of 12, having prepared me to sing some of the arias. And I sang for Menotti and for Sam Shotson the head of NBC, and they decided I should be trained at the Columbus Boy Choir School, which was on the Campbell Estate in Princeton, New Jersey. So my first time outside of New York, and with boys my age, but that were not from New York. They were from all over the country. They were from Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, out west. I had never been away from home in Brooklyn. I'd never been in an environment like that because, of course, it was primarily Christian, not Jewish. And I was from a Jewish family. And when the lights went out and the kids were talking about how their father whooped them with a cat o' nine tails, I thought, wow, that's not Jewish. That's not. When my parents took me and dropped me off there, you come in a door and down the steps on a red carpet. They're shown around and we're all treated royally, and then they leave up the carpet, out the door. Then you are warned, don't ever go on that carpet again. It's just for guests, and don't use that door. Well, that's strange. And mind you, like I'm 12 and 13. And that night, lights went out at like 8:30, and beautiful high ceilinged room. They'd put in like 5 double-decker beds, and there were 10 kids of the same age, yapping away, even when the lights went out. And in comes an officer or a staff member, snaps on the light, and immediately identifies three kids that he knows were talking and takes them down to the says, come here, we're going down to the headmaster. And then he looks at me and he said, and you too. I said, I wasn't talking. He said, you're new here, you should see what goes on. And so I marched down to the headmaster, and one after another we had to take our pants and our underpants down, bend over, and the headmaster had a paddle and it would whack our behinds. That was a new experience for me. That was crazy. But on Sunday, you could stand online and use the one payphone and reverse the charges and speak with your parents. So I'm online behind Chet Allen, who is the guy whose voice was changing, who had created the role of Amal on television from Menotti.
Ah,
And I hear him speaking to his parents, who I think were in the South or in Tennessee. Yes, ma'am. Yes. No, no, sir. No. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's what's going to happen to me if I stay here. And I thought, I've got to get out of here. Besides
so
which,
how long had you been there by then?
about 3 months,
Oh,
four
so
months.
okay, so a short period.
And I didn't see the point of it because they were training a boy choir, and they were training you to sing without the kind of richness and support that goes into opera singing,
Ah,
because it was a boy choir. It was the Columbus Boy Choir originally in Columbus, but now in New Jersey there. They said they wanted to take me back to audition again for now that I was ready. And they sent me there because they prepared me for the entire role. So I go back, and I say, listen, I live in New York. Can I just spend the evening home and I'll come back, I promise, on the first train in the morning? They call my parents, who are delighted. And yes, I have my audition. And then I go home to Brooklyn. I lock myself in that same bathroom and I say, I'm not going back. My parents are stunned. They say, why? So I begin to tell them what I told you. And when I told them about the paddling, my mother was furious because she's the teacher and went on the rampage and said, of course you're not going back there. So bottom
wow.
line, I didn't have to go back there. I went back into my regular junior high school, having only spent 3 months in the Columbus Boy Choir. But I did manage to pass the audition, so they made me the understudy for Amal, and that season at the New York City Opera, which was operating in the New York City Center. They were breaking in a new mezzo-soprano to sing the role of the mother, Clara Mae Turner, who's quite glamorous from Alabama, and who had a pet jaguar in all of her photographs. She didn't bring it to rehearsal, thank God, but it was a gorgeous voice, and I was imbued with a real opera house and mature singers, and I thought this was great. And while I was there understudying for the role of Amal, they put me in children's choruses, like in Carmen, in La Boheme, in all sorts of operas. And so I was having the time of my life. I would go to a regular school and then get on the subway at age 12 or 13 alone, come into Manhattan. It was on 55th Street, City Opera then.
Let me ask you this question. Um, besides music, what subjects did you do well in high school?
I was really good in everything because I'm the son of two teachers and I kind
Ah,
of got the game. So I was very fast thinking. I think my eyes were really good, so I could read anything, and I was free. So I was like a very good student, top of the class.
okay. So how did you
But
decide where you'd go for undergrad? Because you went to Columbia, right?
well, first I went to Madison High School. I
Hmm.
was playing in the orchestra there and singing at the Met because the next season they didn't do a mall at City Opera. My mother auditioned me for sent me up to the Met, and I got in right away and got all the solo roles. And for 3 years, going to a regular high school, I was singing at the Met 2 or 3 times a week. I would do that trip, and that was fabulous. Now, in going, my voice changed in 1956. I was 15 and I wanted to sing, and they told me then you have to keep quiet and don't use your voice, and certainly don't study with a teacher because they could ruin your voice. It's fragile, it's changing. That was not a great advice because I lost all the muscles. I For 3 years I put my energy back onto the strings. I decided to go to college at Columbia College, where I became concertmaster of the orchestra. And 3 years later, I didn't feel I tried my voice and I'd lost all the musculature. That I know it was the wrong advice because my voice was gradually getting richer and darker and going down and bigger, and I was in control of it until I stopped using it. And then I just lost the muscle. So I couldn't find a teacher that really could help me once 3 years had passed. And I became that teacher with my career in opera afterwards, based on all of these things. Everything came together when I got the job at the Virginia Opera. So
Let me ask you this question. Upon reflection, and you were enjoying your singing, you know, voices are gonna change, but on reflection, was it Providence that intervened, and in your analysis of your life trajectory, how did it work out for you? Like just reflecting on it.
well, I mean, it worked out better for me because if you're a singer, you can only sing one part and one range at a time. If you're a conductor of opera, you get to sing all the parts and can be the vortex of all the music flowing through you in the orchestra. So I think all elements of my life came together when I had the opportunity later in life to not only teach, but to run an opera company. It was just definitely that the
So
opportunities were there. I never had to think about what I was going to do when I grew up, type of thing.
right, because like your path was sort
It
of
was there.
designated.
And yeah, there were some turns in the path, like losing your voice and not immediately regaining it after it changed. That forced a different period out of my life, which what I really developed as a violinist and a viola player. And I got very good and was principal violist at Juilliard, and then played in the LA Philharmonic, in the opera, Chicago Lyric Opera, did solo viola tours with piano, with orchestra, married Thea, and she wrote a viola concerto for me, which I performed in the Albert Hall with her conducting. It's been like when one door closes, others open. And
Many more open.
yeah,
So Peter, talk to me and your audience about so in 63 you well, not in 63, but in 61 you went to Juilliard, right?
yes. After Columbia, I was
Right.
already in my last year of Columbia. I went into the orchestra on the days that I could at Juilliard because I was studying with a
Okay.
wonderful violin teacher, Joseph Fuchs, who taught there. And he was sort of very volatile. And because I had the mother I had, I knew how to handle him. And
So
so I
so
got the best out of him. And then I had a conductor, Jean Morel, who was fabulous. And I idolized him, and he was a mentor.
you finished at Juilliard and you got this opportunity to go to the Soviet Union with the
Ah, yeah,
State Department situation, and also to South America. So tell us a little about this journey and this experience.
Well, I got my master's degree from Juilliard in 63, but I continued there for another 2 years until I got the opportunity to teach at the University of California at Santa Barbara in 65. But during that period, I was very active because I was principal violist of the Juilliard Orchestra. Anyone who needed a violist in the field would contact me if they had an opening. And so I got to do a lot of freelance jobs with a variety of orchestras around and out of New York City. But the Robert Shaw Chorale was going on a State Department tour of the Soviet Union and Berlin and Yugoslavia in 1964. And I went with them. And then in 66, they did an 8 week tour around South America, which I loved. So I
Mm.
loved traveling and especially playing music abroad because then you meet people for who you are. The audiences, for instance, in the Soviet Union were fantastic. They loved music. They hadn't heard the kind of music that we were bringing, like Porgy and Bess, to the Soviet Union. So they would meet us afterwards and be very warm and want to show us their city. And, you got, but they wouldn't come anywhere near your hotel because I realized they were frightened that they would be reported as having a relationship with foreigners and Westerners
Right.
at that.
So Peter, so let's fast forward now. So you're back from this fantastic tour of the Soviet Union and South America, and you are hired to teach in the University of California system at
I
Santa
was 20,
Barbara.
24 years old,
Wow.
and I took it seriously. I thought, how am I going to be a teacher if these students that are not that different in age from me? So I really prepared the lessons. They were chock full of information. I was a young teacher that was really focused on trying to get the students to learn the subject matter and give them a taste of my feeling about music. And so that was very good. You really learn your own instrument when you teach it. I was teaching viola to,
Right.
and you had to learn your instrument in a way to articulate it to others. So that forced you to analyze what you were actually doing that was right in a way that you maybe hadn't before.
Peter, how diverse were these classes in terms of race, ethnicity, social class for the students you got?
Social class, very, very diverse. Racially, not so much. I think there were Latinos, but it was predominantly white. There were African Americans in the system, but probably more in UCLA and in Berkeley than in Santa Barbara because I
What
think they,
about Asian? Did
oh,
you have
Asians,
Asian students?
definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely Asian.
In terms of ethnicity, some diversity. You say in terms of social
But
class, very different.
I had diversity in the opera world, diversity in all sorts of ways, ethnically, sexually, people of all different
Mhm.
classes that came from countries that were big and rich, like England and France and Germany, or small, like Vietnam and Tibet. I remember Tibetan singers at the Met. Oh my God, it was really, the chorus was predominantly New Yorkers, and that was very diverse
Right.
ethnically. So I basically, and Brooklyn was fairly diverse. I remember there was a black student in my high school who always wore a suit every day. So it was during the,
So Peter, as we kind of get ready to um, wrap this session, share something about your experience there at Santa Barbara that kind of stands out, whether it be a performance, an incident, or just something that as a professor, you remember either with trepidation or fondly?
Well, of course, being a teacher at Santa Barbara was greatly fulfilling. I found a type of fulfillment in an exchange in giving back to others. See, I was learning up until then, and I continued to learn in order to teach. And that was a slightly different focus of the way that I defined myself, and I enjoyed the giving of that. I really liked that situation. Of course, the most major thing in my life, my marriage, was given to me because Thea wound up for 3 months at that same university, and that miraculously is how we met. She otherwise was totally in the UK. I mean, she lived in London but was born in Edinburgh, and I would not have met her otherwise. And so 53 years of marriage wouldn't have happened. That's the most important thing that happened. But the redefinition of myself, there are a lot of details. I was able to put an orchestra together there and conduct it for the first time. My motivation was that the violist that I was training, I knew how to get a sound that was rather operatic, big and warm, like a singer. But the violinist and the cellist didn't seem to know how to do that. So I created a string orchestra to enable me to train the violinists and the cellists to have the same kind of rich tone that my violist that I was teaching had. So I did it for that reason, but it turned out to be a godsend because when the Virginia Opera flopped in my lap 10 years later in 1975, I had the experience of conducting an orchestra, as well as having sung on the operatic stage at the Met, as well as teaching. So all of these things came together when I got the offer to come and help develop the fledgling Virginia Opera.
Wow. So here's the last question I have for you for this section, Peter. Uh, you were at Santa Barbara starting in 65. That would have been at the height of the civil rights movement,
And the
the
Vietnam War.
and the Vietnam War, and the protests from especially the Berkeley campus, to a lesser extent UCLA. But what was happening in Santa Barbara then
Well,
in terms of activism?
very politically
It was the height
divided.
of the Vietnam War.
The students actually
protesters rallied
burned
by
down
day
the
on
Bank of America in Goleta, which is where the university is. And the Santa Barbara town and Montecito especially was quite conservative. And so, of course, a lot of Santa Barbarans were progressive, but there was the feeling that those people in the university were left wing.
February 25th, 1970,
And
flashpoint was a fire at
there
the
was a
Isla
lot
Vista
of
Bank America.
hostility in a
To them,
similar
it was a symbol of the
situation
war
to
funding
right now.
from America.
So the community was divided, and one felt that, and that actually fed into the closeness I had with Thea, who thought, how could she go to a place where students are burning down the bank? But she did come because it quieted down. As soon as she came, Kent State flared up. So it was a dynamic period.
All right, well, Peter, thank you. This is an extraordinary journey, and as we explore more, your audience will get to see like who Peter is, and that he is much more than a musician. That Peter Mark, has made his mark on this journey, and
Well,
I thank you for sharing.
my pleasure, and thank you for doing this. I do think everyone's life is fascinating and interesting. And even the people that you think you know, there are aspects of them that you still can find out and that are fascinating and that really are formative because you are the collection of all of your experiences. I think life is a great journey.
Awesome. Thanks again, Peter.
I really feel I've had a life filled with extraordinary opportunity and meeting the right people and having the right opportunities just at almost any point or every point. And there have been very different phases of my life which have taught me a great deal. Every aspect and every opportunity that I wanted to pursue with my complete self and dedicated myself to it in a way that I became identified with every portion of my life. And I think once you get to my age, I'm 84 now, you really have a perspective that's very, very different from the way you went through the first part of your life. And you begin to see certain patterns that in other people, in situations, and in yourself primarily, that you can change, or you don't have to. You can be yourself, is what I'm trying to say, more and more as you age, regardless of where you start. And that becomes more and more clear as I get older.
So that's an interesting point that you made there, Peter. So, what nicknames or identities matters most to you? Have you had any nicknames or just anything that you're identified with that matters most to you?
Many, many different aspects of my background came together in running the Virginia Opera, which I did for 36 years, which is the major part of my professional career. But it was so right for me because of my background. I excelled in academics. Both of my parents were teachers. I kind of understood by osmosis what teachers wanted from their pupils, and therefore I really did everything easily at school. My mother was a musician, not professionally trained, but a very, very good musician, and she brought music into my life. My father was an academic, a historian of American colonial history. And I grew up in Brooklyn, in New York City, and that exposed me to really a lot of opportunities that not everyone had. So this piano teacher, Leland Thompson, I studied with, and I think in the third or fourth lesson, she hauled off and smacked me across the face. And I was humiliated. It was a class situation. And when I came home, I locked myself in the bathroom and told my parents I wasn't going to play the piano anymore. My mother couldn't believe it, but I was crying and blah, blah, blah. It must have been the age 6 or 7. And finally she said, okay, if you're not going to play the piano anymore, what will you play instead?
Tell me, like, when did you first feel like yourself? I mean, because you've had this extraordinary background. When in your life did you first feel like yourself?
That's a hard question because I think in many ways children feel like themselves in the sense that they're very spontaneous and they are operating from truth. Their bodies express everything that they express. Your voice is totally connected. You know, when you're a child, you kind of speak like this. Hey, Harry, give me that toy. So your voice is totally connected to your body. And as a child, you have that connection, which feels great. And by the way, that is the connection opera singers have.
But
That
let me ask you though, because the child's ability to appreciate that level of development, even though they are expressing themselves with authority, like bring that toy, give me the whatever it might be, to have the awareness, say as an adult, where all your faculties are kicking in and you are aware of your power and you can exercise them, and even if you were reprimanded for doing it, I mean, you could still pursue your path, whereas a child might be reprimanded or told definitively not to do something. So, if you kind of think, and I know you say it's a difficult question, but
well, it's one that changes exactly for the reason
okay.
that you speak about. That there's something about the spontaneity of a child that I realized was important and that I protected to the degree that I always felt I nurtured the child inside of me consciously once I became an adult. Didn't want to let go of certain aspects that involved that freedom, the imagination, and the self determination of choosing what you want to do. There was something in that. Yes, I was obedient, but I also understood that those weren't my rules. Those were my mother's rules
Mhm.
as I was growing up. And because she suffered from manic depression, so I needed to be very aware when she came from one room to the into my room. I needed to tell by the way she walked whether she was coming in to kiss me or to hit me. So I developed that kind of awareness and openness to the situation. And I remember even as a child having to protect myself from her intrusion and from her unjust. My father always took her side of things because he didn't want her to get into a worse state mentally. So regardless of if she were wrong or she were right, he would support her. And when she was wrong with the children, with me and my brother, he supported her, and I knew that that what she had done was wrong or what she was saying was wrong. So that awareness began early in my life. It was, and I learned how to work around the fact that my parents had more power than I did. So that's why I'm saying it came gradually. That was one of the early mechanisms which allowed me to separate from my parents and mature to some degree and take responsibility. But I honestly don't think that I grew up until now.
Are you still Peter Pan?
Yeah, I
Peter,
think
right?
I think, well, Alex can tell you there are certain things that I do spontaneously that no adult would do.
So that leads me to this question then, Peter, like, thinking about turning points. Um, what are some of the biggest turning points or crossroads in your life, and how did they change your direction? How did they change your direction?
Well, I certainly think that the period when I was 13, 14, and 15, when I was singing in the opera house, opened my life to so much richness and fullness. I mean, different cultures, the operas were in different languages, and yet you could be on stage in Andrea Chenier is about a French revolutionary poet. It's a wonderful opera. But here, as kids, we were on the scene, we had to sing. But during the French Revolution, instead of guns, the kids were playing with little guillotines on stage. And so I'd be on stage playing with my little guillotine, and the chorus women were behind me. They're about to sing because the tumbrils were going to rage through with captured aristocracy that was going to be guillotined in the aftermath of the French Revolution. But when I was leaning back, I could hear them passing recipes. Oh no, I use a quarter of a pound of butter in that. Right there in the middle of the French Revolution on stage at the Met, this is the world I grew up in there and savored. So it was many worlds all in one. I really wanted to sing. After 3 years at the Met, when I sang in so many operas, and mind you, I went to an ordinary high school because ordinary meaning local. We were in a very good neighborhood in Brooklyn. People were very bright, the kids. My parents figured the world was filled with people who were not interested in opera, and that the sooner that I met them and learned how to live with them, the better. So they wanted me to go to a regular high school, which I would do, but all the colleagues that I had later in life had gone to music and art, a specialized school, so they had a whole network themselves. But never mind. I went to James Madison High School, and at 2 o'clock, I'd get on the subway for an hour and go to Times Square, go to the old Met. I'll be there attending rehearsals and performances, and I'd stay till the end of the opera watching from the wings. And at 11 p.m., at the end of the opera, I'd get back on the subway alone at the age of 13 for an hour and come back to my home in Brooklyn and go to school the next day. I was also practicing the violin.
Peter, what risk did you take and what have you left behind?
Well, you talked about turning point.
Right.
The
So,
opera was one,
right.
but then I wanted to get to the central point there, which is at the time that my voice changed, which ended my career at the Met. The advice I got from the best people there, the maestro who was in charge of me, was not to sing for 3 years while the voice changed, and not to study because that could ruin my voice, which is true. But what actually happened is I lost all the musculature. So for those 3 years, I didn't sing from 15 to 18. And I worked on the violin and viola and got very, very good at that and became concert master at the college and then whatever. Then I tried my voice after 3 years and I had lost all the muscles. It was the wrong advice. And then I went to try to find a teacher that would help me find the kind of voice I had as a child, and I couldn't. So that was a major disappointment and change, and I had to make do in other ways. But later in life, when I got the opportunity to run the Virginia Opera, I became the voice teacher that I needed at that point. And that's what I'm still doing with people. After 36 years of running the Virginia Opera, I am now working with singers in masterclass, online, in person, privately, and helping them based on my background from the Met and everything I've learned running an opera company. So I can be very useful and have been to quite a lot of singers. So that is the long answer to the first
Right.
issue that I had that forced me to change and rethink my life.
By the way, you could think of it in terms of, the second part of the question that I ask is, what did you leave behind? So you left behind the singing, but you took like a whole world with you of offering the kind of advice about using the voice that you wish you had gotten when you pause your singing during those 3 years.
Exactly. And even the academic background that I had that I was good at, I could put to use running the Virginia Opera because I'd never run an opera company before. in 1970, I met my wife, Thea Musgrave, who came from London. She actually is born in Edinburgh, Scotland, but she's a very established and well-known British composer, came to take the place of another British composer at UCSB for 3 months. We met, and I knew instantly that this was someone I wanted to know the rest of my life. I didn't know it was going to be a romantic relationship or a marriage, but now it's like 53-year marriage, almost 54 years.
Wow.
And it's just, she has written operas and concerti. As a matter of fact, she wrote, when we were first married, a viola concerto for me, which I performed in the Royal Albert Hall in London with her conducting. And it was just amazing because it got great reviews. Of course, one of them called me Mr. Musgrave. And then the photo of her conducting me at the proms there went around the world. And in Greece, a friend of ours sent it to us. It had the caption, "Woman conducts her husband."
So Peter, let me ask you this question, just to shift a little, to talk about manhood, responsibility, and values, because you mentioned you've been married for 53 years, almost 54. You mentioned that you are 84. So the question that I have for you is this: what did being a man mean to you at different ages? And how has that definition evolved as you have gotten older? Because, I'm sure at 30, like you are teaching at University of California, Santa Barbara, you are in the prime of your abilities, and like you have seen changes over time. So, what does being a man mean to you, and how has it at different ages, and how has it evolved over time?
This is a very interesting thing. I'm not even sure whether to tell you, but I think it's important here. So
I
I
think I
will.
think your audience would want to know. Interested
Well,
in your
you'll
thoughts.
see how this is tied up with the singing, etc. For whatever reason, I maintained my high child voice to sing with from the ages of 13, 14, and 15, which is late to mature. Some boys change early, and I could have just had a month at the Met and the voice could have changed. But no, it was getting stronger and richer and bigger, and I was understanding how to use it, and I was loving it. But meanwhile, on the medical side, the doctor was concerned and wanted me to have my testosterone, checked, and this, that, and the other thing. And what happened was that they decided to give me, at age 15, shots, which did cause my voice to change and ended my career as a boy soprano. So I had quite mixed feelings about being a man at that stage, because, and also I felt a certain amount of shame that I had needed outside injection to become fully a mature male adult. That always was behind my brain for those years. That gave me a sense of wonder who I really was. And so inevitably, when you're with a group of people that are not musicians and you are open and artistic, you get labeled and sort of taunted. So I had to suffer a bit of that right until the early 20s, I guess. And I mean, I had girlfriends, but there was still, I wasn't a fully mature person until a man, until in my 20s, and until I married Thea, really. Because that's when I knew I wasn't sure I would ever get married. I loved my life the way it was. But the relationships I had didn't seem to last more than 2 or 3 years at most, if they went that long. And so I wasn't even sure when I asked Thea to marry me, whether we would last. But it was the right decision and it was a risk and I took it and I knew instinctively it was right. Now, back to the question. I always felt like a responsible person. How did that shift to being a responsible male? I could see the aggressive and outspoken way that I was. So I wasn't retiring in any way, but I was loose and free. And that meant most people were more constricted. And so they looked at me from the side. When I always honored my responsibilities, whether as a student singing at the Met. I mean, I was never late. I took responsibility. I took responsibility for my relationship with other people. And I had very good instincts. What I have that is very good for what it is that I do is I'm very empathic. I can look at a singer that I'm working with, and actually, when I focus on them, I can feel where their voice is and what's blocking it just by watching them. I mean, it's not an intellectual thing, although I did learn how to articulate it. But I'm able to sense people in a rather profound way when I focus on them. And that's been very useful as a teacher, whether it's teaching singing, teaching viola at the university, or now teaching individual singers who are at different stages of their career. Even in a master class and online, it's an intimate exchange that's very, I have to accept that person. They have to feel that I see them and want to help them and don't judge them. And I believe that is very, very tied into being an adult male. That's the experience that I have, and I've grown from strength to strength. Running an opera company, you have to handle a lot of people. I had a board of 100 people because we ran through a 30-member executive committee because we had to raise money in Norfolk, which is the largest concentration of people in the state, in Richmond, and then in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax. So there were 3 completely separate communities, and I had to run the opera and explain it to all these different people, and they would, not, of course, sometimes not be at the meeting. So you have to be aware of that when they were speaking up on something that you had already covered. You had to find a way to communicate, to bring 100 people together, to raise enough money, and then put on the operas that you yourself have not only cast and found the directors for, but you conduct yourself. So it was a very demanding job, and one that I'm still amazed that I was able to do for 36 years without serious damage to my body. I thrived on it. And a lot of things in my background, like my mother, and my founding president of the Virginia Opera, basically gave me the tools and were mentors in helping me self-achieve what I needed to. There's nothing like being a conductor because you are at one with the music at the same time that you are in the supporting the story. You have to feel which members of the orchestra need your support at that particular moment and what's going on stage and how can you help the singer be the best that they can. It's a very unusual, integral coordinative leadership position, even though you don't make any noise. And that what it is that the audience is appreciating is the sound and the sight of the drama.
So let me ask you this question, Peter. How has expectations around work, partnership, and just leadership in general, how has it changed over time as you have experienced it?
Well, I wasn't, I wouldn't have been able to do any of the successful things that I did without forming relationships with people who were not only intelligent and talented, but with whom I worked out a type of communication that was greater than the sum of the parts. I think I became increasingly aware of that as time went on. You know, when you're singing at the Met, you're responsible for yourself and amazed by all the talent around you. When you're running an opera company, you're choosing every part of the talent, whether it's the person selling the tickets and raising the money, or singing the leading role, or in the chorus, or in the orchestra, and putting them together and leading them. But you're also responsible for getting the support. I agreed to do that, which both roles for the opera company, while it was small, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the responsibilities got bigger. And it was basically a 24-hour-a-day job. You know, I'd wake up in the morning. Fortunately, I slept very well. And right away, I had the day was laid out in front of me in my mind. And there were always impositions on time and new problems. So I had to work those problems out effectively so it wouldn't compromise. For instance, as a conductor, I needed to protect my energy the days that I performed. And yet I was also general director of the company. So I had responsibilities in the office. Well, the Friday night and Wednesday night performances, I had to leave the office by noon to make sure I got enough detachment and rest before the curtain that night. Otherwise, the performance wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have the energy.
Peter, we're going to go into a break. All right, let me welcome back Peter. We've had a fascinating discussion so far as you have discussed aspect of your life, your background, your experience. And we want to shift a little to talk about some of the struggles that you might have dealt with. You know, we're looking just at a broad theme of struggles, resilience, and healing. And my question to you is, what has been the hardest season of your life? And what helped you to get through it?
Well, I think that the hardest season of my mature life, because I think I had a hard time as a child and a teenager with my mother's manic depression. But that taught me a lot, actually, and helped self-actualization, so I can't complain about it. I think undoubtedly the hardest time was when Virginia Opera, which I built and ran as both the general and artistic director for 25 years, expanding it enormously, and then deciding to step down as general director and just be artistic director. I realized, because my founding president, who had stepped down as president, warned me not to do it. And I realized that my days would be numbered if I gave up the top job. But I had had enough of running that three-ring circus with 100 board members, and I really thought it was time to look at way that we could pass this developed company on and ensure its health. So I became just the artistic director, and the opera hired a series of general directors that couldn't do the job properly.
Who stood by you
Oh,
when during your dark days? I mean, you know,
well,
this was a
Thea,
challenging time for you.
my wife Thea, of course, she is
Hmm.
so angry with them, she will never forgive them. I saw it coming. That's why I stepped down 10 years earlier, because I didn't want to spend my life continuing to be the servant of 100 people the way they were, with the problems that there were. I had done enough. I had done 36 years already.
So, what sustained you in all of this? You're not a
Well, I
man.
had a lot of board members left the
Mhm.
Virginia Opera and joined my board. The press also, even to this day, the 50th anniversary of the Virginia Opera, they did a leading article about me. I haven't been there since 2010.
I know you're not a man of faith, but what is it like at the core that kept you going beside the support you had from Thea and from
The board
others?
members. Well, I had an inside knowledge of what was right and wrong.
Hmm.
I had the 35, 36 years that I ran the opera, we never had a deficit, and we built and renovated the opera house, built a pit, built a great company, didn't owe any money. My life's work, in a sense, had been the Virginia Opera. That was the culmination of my life's work, and we could have left significant money when we're gone as a legacy to that organization. So they lost lots. They didn't gain anything by doing it. And finally, what you call emeritus, artistic director emeritus of the company, having fired me. So it's fantastic. I got to organize all of her trip and her press interviews in the hotel. You know, she spoke at the Houses of Parliament for a half an hour in the River event room, and members of the Houses of Parliament and other composers in the field and the board members of the English National Opera were there. Her life, she is reaping the benefits of her 50 or 60 year composing that continues, and she's writing new works all the time. She's written a new opera.
Let me ask you this question then when we think about community and belonging. Um, how was your relationship with to your community change? And maybe the one other question you could consider is what is community to you? Because like you're at this period where you and your wife together, th- you're not going doing much outside. As you mentioned, you do not even have a car in California, in Los Angeles. So the question maybe more appropriately might be, what do you consider community to be? And how has your relationship to community changed from your youth to today?
It's a good question. And I notice, as I am speaking every Friday with the guys, that I don't have that kind of community. I'm
You want to
Jewish.
say a little about speaking every Friday with the guys that so your audience maybe have a sense of
Oh, yeah.
what you're
Well,
talking about.
I started biking every Friday with a group of African American guys who were basically working social workers, who were teachers or part of the prison system, and trying to affect a change on the environment with their studies and their work. And my parents were very progressive, and I respond to that very much. But I identified much more. I don't identify as a Jewish person, although I was bar mitzvahed, or a white person. I identify as a musician. My community is more the community of musicians. And yet, wherever we live, in New York, in the Ansonia, we have developed a community of friends that we see regularly and that we're in touch with. And here, even in this building, we have some very good friends that are our community. And because I'm no longer active in the traveling music field, conducting, the local communities where we are have taken the place. It's too late for us, for Thea, to go out at the age of 97 and go on any of these marches. We give money to the causes that we support and are interested in. But in terms of community, I've felt the value of our friendships much more keenly now, although some of the friends I had even before the Virginia Opera that I'm still extremely close to. Your voice is who you are. Your control over your voice and your ability to express yourself the way you feel is something that every child had, but they didn't have the adult experiences. So to go back to that kind of expression is a tremendous gift, and you have to deal with all of the inhibitions and slings and arrows that life has given you when you're dealing with a singer. Well, I used to think that we could have more profound effect our communities and our country. And the older I get, the less grandiose I realize is our ability, and that it's enough if we live a decent life and a principled life, and one that we ultimately can share with other people in a positive way and give individuals the benefit of our experience. And that seems to me to be the best we could hope for. And that's the way I'm living my life. I mean,
So in a larger institution that you fear we're losing, whether because of the politics, the age, just the times we're in. When we get to the next section, we're going to talk about some of the big cultural changes that we've had. But what institutions, if any, do you see are traditions that like you think we're losing?
specifically in opera, every one of the opera singers in the period that I was singing at the Metropolitan Opera had a phenomenal but very unique voice. As soon as you heard one note, you knew who it was. The proliferation of recording has led to a more generic kind of vocal training that is not as deeply personal because everyone's going toward imitating the great singers. So we're losing finding that uniqueness and revealing what makes each voice individual. I think we are losing a lot in our country on a political level and going backwards. I think all of the performing arts are endangered by what has happened as a result of COVID. People are streaming, they're not going out as much. Why go downtown to the music center and fight the traffic, pay for parking, try to find a restaurant, and then pay for the ticket at the opera or the symphony downtown when you can stream it free while you're in your pajamas on a big screen and have a bowl of whatever it is you want to eat on your side? I think the tradition of the performing arts is about to shift. How it will shift, I don't know. But it is shifting already, and I don't think many institutions are back to the strength they had. A lot of opera companies have folded. A lot of symphonies are on the way out. It's the smaller groups that are having an easier time adjusting. And so I'm fearful that a lot of things could change, both in the field of music, in the field of politics, and more importantly, there's something about the way we have taken to the internet, where everyone's a star of their own lives, that has leveled the playing field in a democratic way, but also made false promotion the name of the game.
We're going to talk about the technology. Some of the biggest changes you have experienced in your lifetime. And yeah, what does that bode for the future? Um, and
Well, like
also,
everything else, I think it's good and bad. Here we are sitting together in a room when we're in fact in two other locations. We've not had to travel to one another and have an enormous setup. We're on Zoom, and
hold the thought, hold the thought. We'll develop that after the break,
okay,
because we also want to talk about culture, tech, the economy, gender, and ask the question. So, Peter, welcome back. Like you've been telling a fascinating story so far. I mean, like you've lived a full life and experience, and I know many can learn what you have done, what you have experienced, and the contribution that you have made. I want to ask you this question. What are the biggest changes you have experienced in your lifetime, and how has that affected you?
the whole technological breakthrough of the internet has changed, both for the good and for the bad. For the good, it has enabled us to reach around the world and speak with people, and also try to understand them and to widen our individual communities, and also to associate with just about anyone. I didn't grow up with this, and it's a little bit sort of off-putting when you get 200 emails and 150 of them are scams, or sales pieces. That needs some kind of regulation. In other words, this seems like a democratic direction that the world has taken, but it hasn't been used that way, because right away people are using it to scam, to distort the truth. It used to be, when I went to school, there was a certain body of knowledge that an educated person was supposed to have. It's true it was narrow, but it kept growing, especially in our country, which is a multi-racial democracy, which was founded on wonderful principles that haven't been fully achieved. And I think it is a country that has the potential to fulfill its original promise much more fully, even though it seems like the opposite is happening now. The pendulum always swings. But I think it's very dangerous when people overtly are not telling the truth, and they know they're not. And they are convincing a whole lot of other people that what they're saying is true, simply because they have the money to put it out there. That is not, it happened to some extent earlier in my lifetime, and I may not have been aware of it. But it's happening on a grand scale now, and the amount of money that is in politics is so corrupt that it's got to get out if we're to become a really respected country and a true democracy. But
But
the important thing is really how to learn to think. It's not the body of knowledge that you need, it is the training of your mind to discipline so you can go further into finding the truth.
Peter, what I want you to then just speak to, just in the interest of time, is how the technology has altered daily life and relationship, for you in your experience, and what has changed, about gender, about race, and about work during like this transition. You've been at this for more than 50 years. What are some of the changes that you have seen? And if you could take maybe a couple or 3 minutes to explicate the information, that would be appreciated.
Well, I wish I could. I'm not sure I know the extent of how much it's changed and how it's affected things. I just know that I don't have the same. When I used to get up in the morning in the summer, I really had, the day was open. I could exercise, I could go out on the patio, whatever. Now, so much time is spent going through the emails. And why? And you feel you need to read this, that, or the other thing. And those that I do, I will save on my desktop in a folder. But I may never get to read it. The thing is that I haven't found a way, since I'm not a child of the internet, of living the kind of life I want to live and using the internet in the ways that's good for me. I think it's a very dangerous tool in the wrong hands and combined with money politically. I think it can delude a lot of people. It's true, eugenics was started with scientists, but science misproves it. So the thing is that now there is no standard of truth or science, and that has crept up to the top ranks of our government in a way that seemed inconceivable before. I haven't found a way to live with it yet.
So, Peter, let's maybe change direction a little. I want to talk about success, happiness, and legacy. How have your definition of success, happiness, and legacy evolved over time? And I want you to think about how you thought about it in your 20s compared to in your 50s,
No, I
to
think
your
that
70s, and now in your 80s.
I believe as a young person, success for me meant finding a role to play and a job to have that would support me independently and use my talents and be a job that I would like doing. That I never measured success in terms of money. I do think happiness means doing what you love doing and being able to do that and having positive feelings about yourself, your loved ones, and the world. I believe that's the key to.
Have your perception changed between
Yeah.
when you were in your 50s compared to where you are now in your 80s?
Well, sure. I think when I was when I was in my teens and 20s, I'm sure I was fighting to identify what I might have been good at and fighting the thought that how can I be a decent adult, and struggling and comparing myself against others because that's the way you are when you're younger. now, and you have goals, and you don't always look at the cost of your getting to the goal. As I've moved through the ages, I've considered the cost. That's why at age 60, was it 60? Yeah. At age 60, I stepped down from being the general director of the Virginia Opera to just being the artistic director. That was a choice. That was the opposite choice I would have made when I was 30. More and more, I identify the relationship I have. I have the time to really look at people and try to understand what makes them tick and try to appreciate the parts of them that I could. I didn't have time as the general director of the Virginia Opera to get to know people that I might have liked knowing or to benefit from another person's experience. I was too busy. I think people saw me, passed them by, and wondered why I didn't say hello to them when I was not. Was focused on going where I was going, and didn't take it in that they were there. Now I really look at the scenery more.
Yeah. So Peter, here is maybe a question for you. What advice do you have for younger men and for future generation? What do you wish them to understand about love, money, purpose, and just taking care of themselves and others? You know, we're talking about advice to younger
I
men and future generation. Yeah. What do you want to tell them?
I think I've been watching a lot of television series about struggles and war in this, and I think the '60s had it right. Make love, not war. That how can you? Everyone loses in war, and it's horrific. And the impetus for destroying the technology is greater and greater for the ability to destroy lives. How could we continue to do that? I mean, love is the only value. I'm not formally religious, but I am spiritual because as a musician and also with that feeling of love. The reason I'm not formally religious is I've seen the horrors that have been perpetrated in the name of religion. And I can see that today also. And I
What about
believe that
purpose? What about purpose? Like, what would your advice be to young men, to younger generation about purpose?
I think you have to look into your heart first and look into what your values are as a human being before you decide to go for a job, a career, money, a marriage. I think that you have to seriously understand who you are before you make those decisions for you to have any happiness or success. I also think the promise of a multiracial democracy is being fought over in politics today, that money is corrupting the fight, and that we are witnessing, hopefully, the last desperate gasps of white supremacy, and that young people see that, and hopefully they will continue to fight for the principles upon which this country was founded.
So, as a
And I believe
closing,
that seriously. I can't open myself to all the suffering in the world because it's too much. But watching the greed of corporate titans, the inhumanity of corporate decisions, the destruction of lives in wartime and the animus that is developed and fanned into flames by politicians. There has got to be a better way. And the
The-
young people need to fight for it, because you cannot wait as long as I've waited to realize what I've realized. There isn't time. The world will be destroyed if you wait as long as I have.
that's an important charge to the future generation, and to young men. So, as a closing thought, Peter, if you could preserve one story, one message to those who come after you as you look straight in the camera, for this recording, um, what would it be? What one story you'd want to make sure that your audience gets?
I've learned the most important things in my life by what I love, by going after what I love. I've learned from my love of opera, my love of people, and my wife. And I think it's the most important thing to focus on. I love Aretha Franklin. I can't get no satisfaction.
A time, a time that you change your mind.
You know, when you get new information, it's stupid not to, to use it.
A mentor you still hear in your head.
My founding president of the Virginia Opera, Edith C. Harrison.
A regret you have made peace with.
I didn't have the kind of international conducting career that I could have. I made peace with it because instead I built the Virginia Opera and put all my focus there. And I don't regret it.
A photo you wish everyone could see, and why.
Oh, there are so many moving photography in the world. I only am thinking of the horrible war photographs that jumped into my mind, like the young Chinese boy standing in front of the tank rolling in Tiananmen Square, or like the horrible images. I don't know why I would wish people to see it.
Peter, let me thank you for this chat. This has been unbelievable. Like, you've had an experience, a lifetime of experience that, um, it's the sum of many put together. And I know we're only scratching the surface because I've kind of, hurried you on. But I really appreciate this. And I certainly hope that, the audience that will see, the people who will hear, will learn something, gain something, and certainly benefit from a Columbia man, a Juilliard man, California, University of California, Santa Barbara professor, a voice trainer, a conductor, a man who is married to a woman who might be his equal, if not, pass him as a conductor herself. And music
Composer.
is in your bones, in your veins, in your blood. And I thank you. A final word for, people tuning in.
Well, I have been incredibly lucky in the sense that my life has been so full, but I've been open to it. And I do believe there are opportunities all the time. For instance, I almost didn't take the opportunity to run the Virginia Opera because I never ran an opera company before. But it's my wife, Thea, said, "You get over there and do it." Gave me the strength to agree to do it. I think you can only have experiences if you seize opportunities.
And that's a good note to end on. Thank you, for seizing this opportunity.
Well,
And the experience has been, just exhilarating. I mean, I've learned so much, talking to you and look forward to our continued association. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
All right, Peter, have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.